heading into some serious trouble. The BJP thinks India's power comes from a centralized, unified vision. Actually, India's power comes. It's a fight, and we're pretty convinced we'll win the fight. I didn't walk 4,000 kilometers because, I like walking 4,000 kilometers. I walked 4,000 kilometers because there was no other way to get our message across.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have the unique privilege, of course, of welcoming one of the most distinguished figure in Indian politics, Mr. Rahul Gandhi. Thank you so much, Mr. Gandhi, for joining us. You went to Bharat Jodo Yatra, you met people. It was a really time of reinvigoration of the Congress party, and also you got to learn so many things. So what did you learn, and how are you going to translate those insights?
What I learned in the Yatra was 2 or 3 different things. One, I realized that what is called the politician in the West and in India is basically dead, right? It's a category that has collapsed on itself. If you want to do politics, you cannot use the same old rules that you were using before. It doesn't work. And so you have to do it with a completely new imagination and in a different manner. That was one thing I learned. And the second thing I realized, which is connected to the first, is that huge part of why the politician is dead is because he's not listening anymore. Politician has gone into a zone where he just wants to please at all cost. What people actually want is not somebody who just listens to them. What they want is a conversation. What they want is sometimes for him to be challenged or her to be challenged, and sometimes for them to be challenged, right? And that conversation is gone.
The dominant image of India in the past 10 years has been of economic development, somehow curiously with existing problems. So what do you think in the past 10 years, what has worked, what hasn't worked?
Whenever you talk about economic development, right, you have to ask the question, in whose interest is that economic development taking place? Any economic system that grows, it never grows in the interest of everybody. It always grows in the interest of some groups. The question to ask is, what is the nature of that growth and who is benefiting from that growth? Right next to the figure of growth in India, you have the figure of unemployment in India. So India is growing, but the way it's growing is by concentrating wealth, by massively concentrating wealth towards very few people. And most of the growth is happening based on natural resources, on consumption, and not on production, which for a country like India is a real problem, because without a production system, without a production network, without manufacturing, country the scale of India simply cannot employ its people. Similar to the United States, we are operating on a debt sort of model, and we are no longer producing things. The real challenge in India is how do we set up a production economy is able to give large numbers of people jobs. We have 2 or 3 businesses that pretty much control our entire business system. We have Mr. Adani. Everybody knows he's directly connected to the Prime Minister. He owns all our ports, all our airports, our infrastructure, agriculture, mines, power. That level of concentration, you'll get growth, but you won't get any distribution. And a country like India needs distribution.
So why do you think this discontent and this growing inequality, the highest unemployment rates, why do you think this has not translated into like electoral outcomes or even like mobilization of people?
There is massive mobilization of people, but for an election, right, you need infrastructure to fight an election. So you need a free media to fight an election. You need a fair legal system to fight an election. You need fair election commission to fight. You need access to finance. You need institutions that are neutral. Imagine the United States where the IRS, the FBI, their full-time job is destroying the lives of the opposition. So that's the paradigm we're in. I didn't walk 4,000 kilometers because, I like walking 4,000 kilometers. I walked 4,000 kilometers because there was no other way to get our message across. Even my social media is fully capped. I've got a shadow ban 24/7. My Twitter's under control, my YouTube's under control, and I'm not alone. The entire opposition. So those are the dynamics that the opposition in India is dealing with. I don't think India is running a free and fair democracy anymore. I think 90% of Indian media is controlled by 3 people.
Yeah, and the media is famously not generous to you, right?
No, I'm a problem because I represent groups that are not represented in the media, right? Poor, I represent Dalits, tribals, OBCs, weaker sections. They have no access to the media. The media is not interested in them. The big battle in India is actually the caste battle. So we're running almost from a caste perspective an apartheid system. So that's what I'm trying to change, right? Because the entire system is controlled by a very thin group.
I'm glad you mentioned caste because I go to a public policy school. Very few people from the marginalized caste. I myself am OBC, so I really see caste in everything. But one curious thing I've noticed is that there's a proportion of student body which is interested in running for office in their respective countries, but the Indians are just never interested because they're always the barrier they think is caste, this caste algorithm. If they run for office, their caste matters. They can only run for office from like certain constituencies. Some like Muslims, so the representation will never translate. So how does INC sort of, or India Alliance, let's say, envision how will it break these caste algorithms?
In India, politics is a hard business. I would even go to say it's a brutal business. So I'd be surprised if you'd get people sitting in Harvard Kennedy School who'd say, listen, we want to go into full-scale, hardcore combat. But there are many, many guys who come from a different space who are more than ready to fight that stuff. I mean, don't underestimate how painful Indian politics can be and how rough it can be and how harsh it can be.
In your view, what is the essence of India and how do you perceive India's role and identity in the global context?
There's two visions of India that are in combat. One idea says India is a union and the other idea says India is a nation. A union requires a constant negotiation. And if you think about India as a union, then you protect the negotiation. And we feel India is a union of states, and what makes India India is the negotiation between its people, the conversation between its people, which is based on democracy, which is based on human rights, which is based on freedoms, which is based on an institutional framework that is neutral. The BJP and the RSS believe that India is not a union, that it's a nation with one ideology, one religion, one language, and they are not interested in really having negotiation or a conversation. So they kill the negotiation, they try and capture the institutions. So that's really the political fight in India right now. We feel if you end the negotiation in India, the conversation between the union, India collapses. India tears itself apart. So you can see that Manipur is burning, you can see Jammu and Kashmir is burning, you can see Tamil Nadu has a problem. So you can see that, as somebody said to me the other day, there's problem on the edges. And if you want to understand a system, you've got to look at the edges and see, okay, what's going on at the edges. So imagine if you're from the United States, in North Carolina, the writ of America doesn't run. That's what's going on in Manipur. No central forces can go into Manipur, and it's full-scale civil war going on there.
So how do you balance as a political leader, so especially in this political climate, talking about giving people what they want versus what they actually need to hear? So we tend to talk a lot about everything is fine, we'll give you free internet, versus how do you talk about what they need to hear, that there are these problems that they
First
need
of all,
to address.
as a politician, right, something I discovered, communicating by talking is almost useless. We do it, it's not powerful. It's almost a waste of time. Communicating by doing, communicating by acting, as opposed to communicating by talking. And then you can talk around the action. The Bharat Jodo idea, it's a very powerful communication. We walked 7 hours a day. We spoke half an hour a day. If you ask anybody what we said, people remember 1 or 2 things. But everybody knows that we walked 30 kilometers a day for 150 days. So communication is much more about core values than it is about technicalities. And India is an example. Here, democracy is being over.